And joining us now from Alaska is Jim Adams, who's the Alaska Regional Director for the National Parks Conservation Association, where he works to protect Alaska's national parklands. Welcome to Background Briefing, Jim Adams.
Thanks, Ian. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thanks for joining us. And in protecting Alaska's national parklands, I take it you're also protecting the animals that live in these more than 20 million acres.
Yeah, the wildlife on national parklands are, a prime part of, one, why they were set aside to be protected for all Americans, and two, a big part of the experience people search for when they visit national parklands.
Well, as you know, the National Park Service published new rules in the Federal Register on Tuesday, reversing the Obama administration's rules against what was considered to be barbaric practices by trophy hunters, killing wolves and including their pups, and shooting hibernating bears in their dens, including killing the mothers and their pups, and gunning down swimming caribou from motorboats, etc. So let me begin with, why would people want to do that in the first place?
People want to do that. The state of Alaska wants to allow people to do that to increase caribou and moose populations. The state of Alaska has a long history of doing a bunch of things, like allowing the aerial shooting of wolves or the running of wolves until they're so exhausted that they can be killed, to increase caribou and moose populations, plain and simple.
So they bait these grizzly bears with doughnuts soaked in bacon grease? Is that a part of the techniques?
This current rule, among other things, does allow the killing of black bear cubs and mothers in dens. It allows the killing of wolf pups and wolves during denning season in the dens, and it does allow the baiting of brown bears on national preserve land. And, the baiting is exactly that. You put a bunch of bacon grease or donuts or salmon, whatever you have, into a bucket, and you lure in a bear. The problem, there are a bunch of problems with it. One of them is that you're not just luring in one bear, you lure in a bunch of bears. And then, you pick one and you shoot it, and the rest of them wander off, and now they're habituated to food, and they're a danger to other people. It's really outrageous.
So is this being done by President Trump at the behest of his son, Donald Trump Jr., who we know likes to go out and shoot quite often endangered species, big game, etc.? The Safari Club International, which is promoting the shooting of big game, they've auctioned off a weekend dream hunt through Alaska with Donald Trump Jr. as part of their annual convention. So it's not difficult to see that maybe Donald Trump Jr. is the beneficiary of this, or the reason why these rules were overturned, apart from the fact that they had Obama's name on it, and we know that President Trump is obsessed with anything with Obama's name on it. He has to undo whatever it is.
Well, the Safari Club International has definitely been a proponent of this rule, which, first started bubbling up when Secretary Ryan Zinke was the head of the Department of Interior. And Bernhardt, the new Secretary of the Interior, has just pressed on ahead. Yes, I guess maybe the answer to your question is some of the organized sport hunting groups have really supported this rule, and they support it because they want more opportunities to kill caribou and moose, and because they want the state to, continue to increase hunting on national parklands, because frankly, they don't recognize them as special or as important to all Americans.
But I understand that there's no scientific evidence to support the idea that by murdering wolf cubs and bear cubs in dens, hibernating, and killing their mothers, that somehow increases the availability of moose and caribou, which apparently these big game hunters like Donald Trump Jr. prefer to shoot. Is there any evidence that it actually works, this barbaric practice?
Well, I guess I'd focus first on whether we want it to work on national parklands. Right? National parklands were set aside for all Americans. Do we want them to be giant game farms for sport hunters? I think the answer is, absolutely not. And it's outrageous to think that is where we might be heading. In terms of the evidence, I'd say it is extremely mixed. There, in most cases, what the state calls predator control or intensive management has not worked to increase moose and caribou populations. But in a few cases, it has in very special situations. So, it's not fair to say a blanket no, but what it is fair to say is in most cases, no, and they've done a lot of killing of predators across the state, probably for no reason. And then finally, coming back to, and we don't want that to happen on national parklands.
But your organization, I take it, is not opposed to hunting per se. It's just opposed to this kind of barbaric practice, which could hardly be considered hunting.
Correct. National parklands and some national preserves, which are kind of a part of the park system, sport hunting is allowed on those preserves, and we think that was a reasonable compromise when they were creating the park system in Alaska. 50 million acres of parklands in Alaska is an incredible amount of wild country, and it seems appropriate that some of it be open to hunting. But it is not appropriate to allow the kind of hunting that is aimed at turning these lands into just game farms for caribou and moose and for sport hunters.
So what can stop this? What can reverse the reversal of Obama's rules?
Well, National Parks Conservation Association is certainly looking into the possibility of litigation. I think that it is likely that a reversal like this 3 years or 4 or 5 years after the Obama rule in 2015 is not, frankly, just not kosher. It's bad government to reverse arbitrarily something that your predecessor put into place, and they have certainly done that here. So we will investigate litigation. Beyond that, it will be up to, if there is a new administration, a new Senate, them to pressure the Department of Interior to change this rule or to pass a law that says this is the wrong thing to do on national parklands.
But what can our listeners do? I'm assuming, like me, they're outraged.
Yeah, I hope they are, because frankly, there are a lot of things to be outraged about right now. But this is one, and there is a way that we can work on it. If folks will email their senators or their congressional representatives and tell them this is important to them, just that alone is awesome. And if they will actually then forward the email to me at jadams@npca.org, then I'll know they've contacted them, and that will be very helpful for me.
That's jadams@npca.org. Is that right?
That's right.
Well, can you put pressure on the two senators, Sullivan and Lisa Murkowski?
The senators here have generally supported these rules and opposed the Park Service's efforts, have supported the current Park Service's efforts to change the rules. They view it as a states' rights issue. So rather than thinking about it in terms of game farms or the killing of cubs or pups, they like to think about it solely as, should Alaska have the right to regulate hunting? And when they kind of put on those blinkers, they come up with the answer that sure.
Well, but what does that say about the population, the voting population of Alaska? Are they for it or against it?
I think that a majority of Alaskans, almost no one supports killing, black bear cubs or wolf pups. It's not something that people think of themselves as supporting, right? And the comments that the Park Service received over the course of the comment period here, over 100,000 people wrote in opposing it, and the vast majority of Alaskans who wrote in also opposed it. I'm not aware of any polling that's gone on, but to my knowledge, it's hard for somebody to get fired up about, crawling into a black bear den and killing a mother and cubs in the middle of the winter or shooting a wolf pup.
Well, but that's what's going to be happening, though, isn't it?
It's now legal in parts of the national preserves, thanks to the Trump administration and this rule.
And when is Donald Trump Jr. showing up for the dream hunt, do you know?
I do not know. I was not invited.
Surprise, surprise. Well, it is just heartbreaking that this is, and as you say, there's so much to be outraged about in this era of Donald Trump and his dreadful family. But, maybe we're suffering from outrage fatigue. Is that a possibility, Jim, just in closing?
I don't think so. I am really hopeful that we are not. And when I look at the demonstrations that are going on around this country around policing and racial inequity, and when I see the reaction people have had to this rule and so many other things, I think that this country has a vast capacity to push back. And I think there's a real commitment to doing better, particularly around some of the systemic injustice issues that are, so crucial to this country and its future.
Well, Jim Adams, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
My pleasure, Ian. Thank you so much for having me.
And again, I've been speaking with Jim Adams, who's Alaska's Regional Director for the National Parks Conservation Association, where he works to protect Alaska's national parklands. And his email is jadams@npca.org.